There is a silence that only paranoid minds can hear, a whisper inside the skull that repeats over and over. They're watching, they're planning, they're coming. But the strangest thing, most of the time, no one is. Paranoia is not just fear, it is fear with teeth. It sharpens every glance, every silence, every word unspoken into a weapon pointed at you. You feel something is wrong, but you cannot prove it. The room is normal, the people are smiling. Still, something tells you to run. Why does this happen? Why does your own brain betray your sense of peace and replace it with suspicion? Why does it feel sometimes like everyone is a threat, even those closest to you? This is not just anxiety. This is not just overthinking. This is the dark psychology of paranoia, where the lines between self-preservation and self-destruction blur until you cannot tell if you are the victim or the real danger. You might tell yourself it is instinct, that something feels off, so your mind is just keeping you safe. But have you ever paused to ask, what if that voice is lying to you? What if the fear is not keeping you safe, but keeping you trapped? Because here is the haunting part. Paranoia feels like awareness, but it is actually a form of blindness. It replaces truth with patterns, replaces people with threats, and replaces reality with a never-ending question: what if they are out to get me? And in the worst cases, it morphs into an unshakable belief that they must be out to get you, because why else would your heart beat so fast, your hands sweat, your thoughts spin like broken gears? Paranoia is deeply personal. It wraps around your most sensitive memories and whispers that they are proof that you were hurt before and you will be hurt again. Your past becomes the prophecy of your future. In today's world, where betrayal can come through a screen, where trust is bought and sold in algorithms, and where perception is filtered through curated illusions, it is no wonder we feel hunted. But the true question is not whether you are being watched. It is whether your own mind has become your watcher. Is it possible that the psychology of paranoia is not just a condition of danger, but a creator of it? Can a belief, just a belief, actually change your behavior so deeply, so secretly, that you become the very threat you feared? That is the riddle at the heart of paranoid behavior, and it is darker than we think. Because every time you question someone's motive without evidence, every time you assume betrayal before love, every time you choose suspicion over understanding, you feed the shadow. That shadow, according to Jungian psychology, is not just a metaphor, it is a part of you, the side you deny, the traits you reject, the impulses you fear. Paranoia, perhaps, is not about them at all. It is about you, or rather, the parts of you you refuse to face. But before we dive deeper, ask yourself something honestly. When was the last time you believed a lie, just because it made your fear feel safer? That question holds the key to unlocking the deeper dark psychology at play. Because once we begin pulling the thread of psychological paranoia, we uncover something terrifying. It is not always the world that is unsafe. It is our own unexamined mind. And here lies the real paradox. Can someone who sees danger in everything ever be truly safe? Stay with me, because what comes next will shake how you see reality. We are about to look deeper, not into the people you fear, but into the you that fears them. And in doing so, you may discover that paranoia is not a reaction to the world, but a mirror of your soul. Paranoia often disguises itself as intelligence. You think you are simply being cautious, logical, hyper-aware. But beneath that sharpened alertness, something else lurks. A tension between clarity and distortion, between protection and projection. A fragile line where fear becomes a filter and trust dies silently in the background. Psychologists describe paranoia as a state where suspicion becomes chronic, where the mind constructs narratives of threat with or without evidence. It is not merely fear, it is a fear with scaffolding, a belief system that reshapes the world into something hostile. According to the DSM-5, paranoid personality disorder involves long-standing patterns of distrust, hypersensitivity to perceived insults, and an unrelenting need to anticipate betrayal. It is not the kind of paranoia that flickers in a moment of doubt. It is the kind that settles into the bones. But even outside of clinical diagnosis, psychological paranoia seeps into everyday lives. You avoid certain people, interpret silence as strategy, see coincidence as conspiracy. You do not question whether the threat is real. You only ask when it will strike. Cognitive science has long examined this human flaw, the brain's tendency to see patterns in randomness, to seek out meaning where none may exist. It is called patternicity, the evolutionary trait that once helped our ancestors survive in predator-filled landscapes. A rustle in the grass was always safer interpreted as a snake than a breeze. Those who assumed threat lived longer. But here's where things twist. We inherited that same detection mechanism, yet our threats have changed. They are not wild beasts in the brush anymore. They are texts left unread, a friend's subtle glance, a quiet room after your name is mentioned. And still the survival instinct remains, eager to interpret, decode, defend. The survival instinct, once noble, now sometimes turns against its host. Imagine for a second, you are in a room with people who laugh. You are not sure why. A part of you begins to spiral. Are they laughing at me? Did I do something? Should I say something? This spiral, if unchecked, becomes a loop that reinforces itself. Your mind connects dots even when there are none. And over time, you trust those imagined dots more than anything real. This is not irrationality. It is over-rationality. The mind works over time to make sense of uncertainty, but the cost is steep. You lose the ability to tolerate not knowing. You lose the freedom of emotional ambiguity. Carl Jung believed that when the conscious mind refuses to accept its flaws, it projects them outward. What you resist persists. So what if the enemies we fear outside are just the enemies we buried inside? When someone says, "I do not trust anyone," they often mean, "I cannot trust myself." That is not an accusation. That is an invitation to examine what part of you cannot risk being vulnerable, to ask why being hurt once, maybe twice, has convinced you that pain is inevitable and trust is foolish. But how do you know if the threat is real? How do you separate protective instinct from internalized fear? What if the very act of questioning yourself is what paranoia wants to avoid? There is a strange comfort in certainty, even when that certainty is dark. It feels safer to assume betrayal than to risk being caught off guard, safer to close the heart than to leave it open and undefended. But can safety ever be real if it requires you to be alone in your mind? That question, subtle as it is, may be the crack that lets light in. We are only beginning to uncover what lives inside the lens of the psychology of paranoia, the distortions, the defenses, the meaning we make from silence. But what if the real danger has never been what they are doing to you, but what you are doing to yourself? This is only the surface of the secret. To truly see what lies underneath, we must explore the mind when it feels attacked, the self when it no longer feels safe in its own skin. And that is where the shadows begin to speak. There is a war happening inside the paranoid mind, a constant clash between logic and instinct, between the voice that says you are fine and the deeper voice that insists you are not. Even in moments of peace, something trembles beneath the surface, a flicker of doubt, a glance that lasts too long, a message that comes too late. In those moments, your mind becomes its own battlefield. Paranoia, at its core, is not just emotional, it is deeply biological. According to neuropsychologist Dr. Elaine Walker, paranoia activates the amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, more intensely than other forms of fear. In paranoid individuals, the amygdala tends to overreact to neutral stimuli, interpreting ambiguous expressions or situations as hostile. The result? An emotional reflex that fires before your reasoning even has time to wake up. This neurological hijacking is why paranoid behavior often feels uncontrollable. The more you try to reason with it, the stronger it becomes. Fear, after all, is not bound by fact. In a series of experiments at King's College London, researchers observed how people with paranoid tendencies interpret social cues. Participants were asked to rate video clips of conversations between strangers. While most rated them as neutral or friendly, paranoid individuals consistently saw conflict, rejection, or manipulation, even when none existed. These distortions were not simply imagined, they were felt deeply, viscerally. This is what makes paranoia so dangerous. It is not just a belief, it is an emotional reality. The body tightens, the breath shortens, every signal says danger, even when the room is still. And yet, the threat is not outside, it is you, watching the world through a lens that demands betrayal. Philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once said that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Paranoia, perhaps, is the opposite. It is the imprisonment of suspicion, a world where nothing is free and everything must be calculated. Every motive, every word, every gesture. When you live under the weight of chronic suspicion, your relationships suffer first. You begin to test the people around you. You accuse before they can hurt you. You withdraw before they have a chance to walk away. Psychologist Dr. David Freeman describes this as a paranoid feedback loop. You fear abandonment, so you become cold. Your coldness pushes others away. Their withdrawal confirms your fear. The cycle tightens, and trust vanishes. But is the world truly this hostile, or has fear rewritten the map? In modern times, paranoia thrives in silence. A message left on read, a co-worker's meeting without you, a partner looking at their phone longer than usual. In these micro moments, the mind constructs threats, not from what is seen, but from what is missing. The absence of information becomes the source of fear, and that fear fills in the blanks with the worst-case scenario. This is not a personal weakness. It is a consequence of how the human mind handles uncertainty. According to the intolerance of uncertainty theory, people prone to anxiety, and especially paranoia, struggle deeply with not knowing, so they fill the unknown with negative predictions. But the deeper question is not just why we fear, but who we become when fear becomes permanent. When you walk into a room and assume others are against you, how does that shape your behavior? Do you shrink? Do you attack? Do you pretend to be above it all while secretly aching inside? If fear can change how we walk, how we speak, how we love, then who are we really when we are not afraid? Maybe the greatest threat of psychological paranoia is not that it isolates us from others, but that it disconnects us from ourselves. We do not see the world as it is. We see it as we fear it might be. And in that distortion, we lose the most human part of us, the ability to risk trust. But what if you cannot trust because your brain has trained you not to? What if the war inside you has never stopped, and you just got used to the sound of it? There is more beneath this storm. Paranoia does not rise from nowhere. It has roots, and it often grows in the places where you once felt the most unprotected. Sometimes the threat you fear the most is not out there. It is hiding behind your own reflection. Paranoia convinces you that others are the danger, that their motives are poisonous, their intentions twisted, their loyalty fake. But slowly, quietly, it begins to wear your own face. The enemy is not a stranger. It is a part of you that has been watching from the shadows. Sigmund Freud once wrote that we are haunted most by what we repress. The paranoid mind in this light is not just avoiding danger, it is avoiding itself. When we cannot face our own impulses, our own aggression, our own envy, we start to see them projected outward, onto others. The friend becomes the traitor, the stranger becomes the stalker, the silence becomes a plot. Psychologists call this projection, a defense mechanism so subtle and seamless, it convinces us that our internal discomfort belongs to someone else. In paranoia, this mechanism becomes a lifestyle. You are never the liar, someone else is lying. You are never the one manipulating, someone else is playing you. You are never the one hiding secrets. The world is just too dangerous to reveal anything at all. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow self speaks to this. The parts of our psyche we disown do not disappear, they just find new disguises. In the paranoid mind, they reappear as external enemies. But these enemies, oddly enough, often resemble the very traits we cannot accept in ourselves. There is something tragic about watching a person turn into their own jailer. To see someone build a fortress so strong it keeps everyone out, including themselves. The face they show the world becomes a mask, a hardened version of the self meant to survive, not to connect. Underneath, there is often a child, frightened and abandoned, who once trusted someone they should not have. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once claimed, "Hell is other people, but what if the real hell is the version of ourselves that other people reflect back to us?" In paranoia, every interaction becomes a mirror, and when you do not like what you see, it is easier to break the mirror than to question the image. Studies on interpersonal paranoia show a direct link between unresolved guilt and hypervigilance. When you carry guilt that has not been processed, your mind starts to expect punishment. It becomes suspicious of kindness, skeptical of compliments, guarded against love. You do not feel worthy of peace, so when it arrives, you suspect it must be fake. Have you ever felt uncomfortable when someone praised you too much? Did you look for a hidden motive? That is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is woundedness in disguise. And here is where the mask hardens. You stop showing vulnerability. You laugh at nothing. You talk but say little. You test people before they can hurt you. And all the while, you wonder why no one truly sees you. The truth is, they might be seeing you clearly. It is just not the version you want them to see. So you keep the mask on, because behind it there is fear. If people see your flaws, your needs, your wounds, they might leave. Or worse, they might use those things against you. But can a life of guardedness ever feel like freedom? Can you truly love if you are always checking the exits? These questions are not easy, but they matter. Because the longer you wear the mask, the more you forget who you are without it. Paranoia wants you to believe that the world is full of liars, betrayers, manipulators. But what if it is full of mirrors, waiting for you to stop looking away? We are not finished, because beyond the mirror, something more deceptive lies. A presence that feeds not only on fear, but on your desire to be right. Let us look closer, not at the people you suspect, but at the patterns you follow without realizing. It starts with a glance that feels too long, a pause in a conversation that seems unnatural, a message that goes unanswered just a little too long. From the outside, these are normal, everyday moments. But from the inside, for the paranoid mind, they are signals, they are warnings, signs that danger is near. Even if no one else sees it, you feel it. And once the feeling begins, it is hard to stop. This is how the dark psychology of paranoia builds its illusion, not with hard evidence, but with an overwhelming need to connect dots, to make sense of discomfort, to transform unease into certainty. It does not wait for proof, it creates its own. Confirmation bias plays a powerful role in this process. Once you suspect someone might betray you, every small action becomes evidence. Their kindness becomes manipulation. Their absence becomes abandonment. Their disagreement becomes disloyalty. You stop asking if your theory is true. You start collecting reasons to prove that it already is. In a Stanford study on belief perseverance, researchers found that even when participants were told their initial assumptions were false, many continued to believe in them. The brain, it seems, prefers to keep its story intact, even when truth threatens to unravel it. This is why paranoid behavior often persists long after the original trigger is gone. The mind wants consistency, and fear offers it. In paranoia, doubt becomes more comforting than trust. It gives you control. It makes you feel protected. But that protection comes with a cost. You stop experiencing the world as it is, and begin to experience it as you fear it might be. What makes this more dangerous today is the world we live in. Technology has made us more connected, but it has also made us more watchful. Social media encourages constant comparison, endless surveillance, subtle judgment. You are not just living your life, you are managing your image, watching who watched your story, wondering what silence means when someone suddenly goes quiet. Paranoia thrives in this environment because ambiguity is everywhere, and our minds cannot stand ambiguity for long. We want answers, even if they are painful. We would rather believe someone is out to hurt us than believe we simply do not know. Researchers at the University of Cambridge found that people with high levels of social anxiety and psychological paranoia were more likely to interpret vague online interactions as hostile. A post not liked becomes a silent insult. A comment not replied to becomes an invisible war. The mind fills in the gaps with stories, and the stories become truth. Philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once said, "A nothing would serve as well as a something, if the nothing is believed to be something." That is the trick of paranoia. It turns shadows into shapes, silence into screams, uncertainty into betrayal. But ask yourself, have you ever been so sure that someone was against you, only to find out later they were struggling with something entirely unrelated? In that moment, did you feel relief or shame? When we are paranoid, we do not just protect ourselves, we hurt others. We misinterpret love as strategy, honesty as manipulation, patience as avoidance. And in doing so, we sometimes create the very distance we feared in the first place. You say you are looking for the truth, but what if you have become addicted to the suspicion? What if feeling suspicious makes you feel alive? There is something seductive about the idea that you know something others do not, that your fear is wisdom, that your distance is strength. But can strength ever exist without trust? Can fear ever tell the full story? These questions do not end here, because deeper still, beneath the patterns and suspicions, lies the hardest truth of all, the truth that you have been trying to protect yourself from, even as it shapes your every move. And that truth is what we are about to confront next. Somewhere in the mind of every person who suffers from paranoia, there is a question that hides beneath all the others. It is not, are they going to hurt me? Or even, can I trust them? The real question, the one that shapes every reaction, every doubt, every guarded moment, is simpler and far more devastating. It is, am I safe in my own mind? Because paranoia, once it takes root, does not just make you afraid of people, it makes you afraid of your own perception. You start to doubt whether your instincts are real, whether your memories can be trusted, whether your thoughts are working for you or against you. Research from Dr. Paul Tsiolkovskis, a prominent clinical psychologist, shows that individuals experiencing paranoid thoughts are often caught in a cycle of cognitive distortion. They misread reality, but with confidence. They believe they are seeing the world more clearly than others, not less. And the more certain they become, the further they drift from reality. That certainty, ironically, is what makes the dark psychology of paranoia so powerful. You do not feel like something is wrong with your thinking. You feel like something is wrong with everyone else. The distortion does not feel like a flaw, it feels like insight. But that kind of insight is often rooted in fear, not truth. Fear that if you let your guard down, something will go wrong. Fear that the moment you stop watching, you will be betrayed. So you watch everything, you listen closely, you prepare. Until one day, you realize you do not know how to stop. The brain, when exposed to chronic fear, begins to rewire. According to studies on neuroplasticity and trauma, the amygdala becomes hyperactive, while the prefrontal cortex responsible for rational thinking becomes suppressed. The result is a brain trained not to see what is, but to anticipate what might be. This is how psychological paranoia turns from defense into damage. It builds a mental map of the world based on fear, not reality, and eventually that map becomes the only one you know how to follow. But now it is time to ask something even more personal. Right now, as you listen, think about someone you have kept at a distance, someone you doubted, judged, suspected. Ask yourself honestly, what proof did you have? Was it something they did, or something you expected? Was it truly them, or was it something unresolved inside of you? Write that name down. You do not need to show anyone, just write it. And beside their name, write one thing you feared they would do to you. Then ask yourself, has it actually happened? This is not about blame, this is about clarity. Because the first step toward escaping the grip of paranoia is recognizing when you are reacting to the past, not the present. And here is the secret, the truth that changes everything. Paranoia is not about danger, it is about pain. It is the echo of old wounds, still unhealed, old betrayals never understood, old fears never soothed. It is the mind's attempt to protect a heart that never got the chance to fully trust again. But protection becomes imprisonment when it stops you from living. And so the question returns, are you still trying to stay safe? Or are you finally ready to be free? Because that is the final shift. When you stop seeing people as threats and start seeing them as mirrors, something changes. You begin to ask different questions, not are they against me, but what am I afraid to feel? Not who is the liar, but what truth have I been avoiding? When you can look into those questions without fear, you start to heal, slowly, quietly, deeply. This is the moment where paranoia loses its grip, not all at once, but piece by piece. And it starts here, with the truth. Every story about paranoia begins in fear, but the real ending is not where you expect. It does not end with finding the villain, exposing the betrayal, or confirming your suspicions. It ends with a choice, one so quiet, so internal, that you might miss it if you are still listening to the noise. You either stay inside the fortress you built, or you open the gate and walk out. The gate, of course, is not physical. It is made of thoughts, beliefs, and scars. It is built from nights when you were left alone, moments when someone looked at you and saw nothing, or worse, looked right through you. Those are the moments that taught your brain to scan for pain and your heart to fear softness. But now, those moments are memories, not threats. The danger is no longer present, but the fear still lives. That is why paranoia lingers. It is not about what is happening, it is about what has happened and how your mind keeps trying to protect you from it repeating. But here is where you must decide, is the protection still necessary, or has it become a prison? This question is not just psychological, it is deeply philosophical. Existentialists like Viktor Frankl believed that freedom lies not in what happens to us, but in how we respond. Even in the darkest mental states, there remains a sliver of choice, a space between trigger and reaction, and in that space identity is formed. You can be a person who watches the world for threats, or you can be someone who chooses to trust, even when it feels like a risk. You can be the observer of your paranoia, or you can become its prisoner. In the language of philosophy, this is a tension between authenticity and fear, between living fully and living safely. But safety, as we have seen, is often an illusion. The walls you build to keep others out eventually become the same walls that keep you in. When you treat everyone as a potential threat, you lose the ability to experience real connection. You cannot love and guard yourself with suspicion at the same time. You cannot know someone if you have already decided who they are. So now the question shifts from them to you. Are you willing to risk trust? Are you willing to let go of the story your mind has told for so long? The one where betrayal is inevitable, where people always leave, where love is always conditional. Because the psychology of paranoia thrives on certainty, but healing begins in uncertainty, in not knowing what someone will do next, and choosing to open your heart anyway. It is not weakness, it is courage. It is the courage to say, even if I get hurt, I will not become the one who hurts others to feel safe. It is the strength to say, even if my mind prepares for war, I will live as if peace is possible. That choice is yours. Not once, but every day. When you wake up, when you hear silence, when someone fails to reply, when your instincts whisper warnings, pause, breathe, ask yourself, is this fear helping me or haunting me? And when you feel the urge to retreat, remember this. Not everyone is the person who hurt you. Not everyone is a reflection of the past. Some people are trying to love you, but they cannot love a mask. So take it off. Let them see who you are. Let them know the part of you that is scared, that is human, that is still healing. Because healing does not mean never feeling paranoid again. It means recognizing the voice of fear and choosing not to obey it. This is the existential choice. Not to destroy the part of you that feels fear, but to choose what kind of person you want to be, even when fear is loud. And if this message found you today, maybe it was not an accident. Maybe you needed to hear that you are not broken, you are just tired of hiding. So take this moment and breathe. Then share this video with someone who might be hiding too. Someone who needs to hear that it is okay to trust again, that it is possible to live without fear controlling the wheel. If this spoke to you, like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because the next video might be the next step in your healing. And maybe, just maybe, it will be the moment you choose to come back to yourself. We are here, you are not alone, and neither is your truth.